Hey friends, thank you for watching this video. I am Mohamad, and today we'll be continuing our journey in building our health tracking API. We'll continue today by building our authentication and our JWT token functionalities. Now, let's jump into it. Today we're going to be continuing building our Sahha application, or basically our health tracking application, and we're going to be adding the authentication and authorization. So, as we see here, we have already added those tickets earlier. Let's see what do they contain. So we said we're going to be enabling JWT tokens, registration through email, first name, last name, and a password. As well, logging in is going to be through email and password. Okay, that sounds good. So let's start directly implementing this. So let's move this card into in progress. Now let's jump back into the code. So the first thing that we're going to be doing here is let's open our terminal and let's navigate to our application .api and let's do .NET build. Let's make sure that our application is building correctly. Okay, great. So now it's building correctly. Let's run it. Perfect. We can see it's running on port 5000 and 5001 for HTTPS. Now let's open Insomnia. And let's try it out. So let's get all users and let's send it out. And we can see we're getting all of the users. Perfect. So this means that our API is running as it should be. Okay, great. So let's stop this again. And let us start by adding some of the NuGet packages that we're going to be needing in order for us to utilize authentication and ASP.NET Core Identity, because that's going to be the main framework that we're going to be using in order for us to authenticate. So let's start first by utilizing .NET, add package, and then it's going to be Microsoft.ASP.NET Core Authentication .jwt bearer. Okay, so let us examine this and let us explain why do we need JWT bearer for us to do an authentication. I think I misspelled something, so let's double check. So .NET add package Microsoft.ASP.NET Core Authentication .jwt bearer. I forgot the dot. Okay, perfect. So as we know, let us go to draw.io so we can explain this. I have already a video explaining why do we utilize JWT token, but this is gonna be like a quick overview. So let's go to draw.io and let us explain it here. So we'll call this demo JWT. Okay. So why do we need the JWT token in order for us to do the authentication? So let's say we have a user. So let's find the user. And that's a nice user. So let's say we have this user, and this user wants to actually log into our API. So let's have an API. That's a nice API. So we have a user, we have an API, and basically the main idea behind a RESTful API, so make this a RESTful API, is it's gonna be completely stateless. A RESTful API is 100% stateless. So what does stateless mean? Stateless means that it does not contain no state at all. What does that mean? So it do not track cookies. It does not track sessions. It do not track any authentication. So that's what means stateless means. So basically, once the request has came to the API, so once, for example, let's say we have a nice arrow that we can utilize. So let's use, let's put here arrow, and we can use this, for example. So we can say, for example, once a request has came from the user to the API, this request is processed by the API and then it is returned back. And once it's returned back, there is no trace of this request again on the API. We can create, of course, some logging in order for us to log all of these, but for now, we actually don't. By default, the API is completely stateless. So no matter what the request is coming to the API, once it's processed and returned back to the user, we don't really care anymore about it. So for example, let's say this user here requested to get all users, for example, or requested to authenticate. Let's stick with the authentication. So authenticate or to log in, for example. So this user sent the username and a password. So let's add here username and a password. Username and a password. So once that user sent that username and a password to the API is going to do its work, where it's going to check if this user is actually authenticated, if this user actually exists, if the password match for this user, all of this different authentication. And once the API is able to verify that this user actually is a valid user, what it's going to do, it's going to generate some kind of a token, and this token basically prove that this user is actually logged in. It's basically give them like a piece of paper and telling them, okay, since you are already authorized, you have the ability to enter or your ability to use this API. If the API did not actually authenticate this user, it's gonna basically tell them, no, you're not authenticated, and it's gonna give them a 401 HTTP code request. It means that they are unauthenticated and unauthorized in order for them to access this API. So once they did that, the API, for example, here is gonna return a JWT token. Okay, so here let's review this again. As a user, I decided to log into this API. I have sent my username and a password. The API is gonna do its magic. It's gonna check if it actually have this user or not, and once it actually authenticate this user, if it actually exists or not, it's gonna actually, if it exists, it's gonna return a JWT token. If not, it's gonna return a 401 unauthorized HTTP response. So once it has returned this JWT token, the API here does not keep a track, oh, this user tried to log in, this user is attempting to log in, or this user failed to log in. It does not care. It's a stateless API. It does not keep track of anything. On the opposite, web applications, some of them actually store the states of all of these inside the memory of the server, which makes it more easier for the server to authenticate. But this creates a lot of load on the server. It makes it to scale up and scale down much more harder, because everything is related to that information inside the memory of the server. But for now, luckily, the API does not track any of this, and this is why it's called stateless. So once that API is returned the JWT token to the user, it basically forget that actually processed this request, unless we have some kind of logging. But other than that, it completely forgets. So that JWT token is returned back to the user. So how does this JWT token help us? So now we have logged in, so let's create another request to the API. So let's do them in a better organized way. So for example, let's do this here, and let's do these here, and for example, so this could be here. Okay, so this is the first request. Now let's create another request, and basically within this request I want to get all the user. We can say get all users. So the API, in order for it to process this all user, it needs to know that this request is coming from a logged in user or a verified user. So how it would be able to do that? As we said before, the user has logged in, so we have provided them with a JWT token. So in order for this API to verify that this user is actually a valid user, the user will need to pass the JWT token back to the API. And once that JWT token is passed back to the API will be able to actually verify that this token is actually valid. It makes sure that this token belongs to the user. And if the API actually verify that this token is a valid token and it has the right access, it will actually process that request and it will send back the user list. In case it does not verify, it will send a 403, and basically, so here it will send, apologies. So here it's gonna send a 403 if it's not authenticated, and here it's gonna send a 401 if it's not authorized to check the API. So basically the difference between a 401 and a 403, let's add them here. 403 equals forbidden, and a 401, it means unauthorized. Okay, so what does this mean? So forbidden means that the user recognizes me as a user and it can validate my request, but I don't have access to that specific request. So that comes mostly if we're having, for example, some kind of role implementation, and this request is only made for admins, and I'm trying, and I am a normal user. I'm trying to request something that's only belong to the admin, and once actually I request it, because I don't have the privilege or the role to get that information, I'm gonna get a forbidden. But for example, if I'm trying to log in or get some kind of information which I'm not authorized, the server will return a 401, which means unauthorized. So let's understand these differences. So here, once I log in, and if my login are invalid, so let us add another one of these. So green one, it means that it passed correctly and it returned a JWT token. But let's make another one, which is the if else scenario. If it fails, and I don't have any of this, so basically the server has rejected my request, it will be basically here a 401 because I'm unauthorized. It's not allowing me to log in. And similarly here, so once I do the request and I need to attach my JWT token so the API will know who I am, and once the server basically process my request and verify who I am, it will basically give me a user list. So let's make this green. And as we can see here, we got the information because we have processed it correctly. But in case I don't have this, so let's add this here. The user here basically, the API will send me here a 403, or it could send me a 401. Depending on if I am actually logged in or not, if the API token, the JWT token that I'm sending is a valid one or not, or if I have access to it or not. So let's make this in red. And this is what we mean here. So basically the steps gonna be, the first one is, let's add them here. So the first step is login. The second step is the server is gonna return a JWT token, and then I'm gonna send the request with the JWT token, and then basically I'm gonna get the information. In case there is not a happy, this is the happy path, which means that this is the expected behavior. Let's make this nice and okay. So basically, okay, let's make this bring forward, and we can use this bring back. Okay, so this is the happy path, which means, let me make this a bit bigger, which means this is the expected behavior whenever we want to implement anything. That's the behavior that we want to see, that the entire process is running smoothly. But what is the unhappy path, which is the unexpected one? As we said before, in case something goes wrong, here the unhappy path, we're gonna get a 401. So that's the first unhappy path. And the second unhappy path is actually we log in. Let's update this to unhappy path. And this is unhappy path 2. And here it's gonna send with the sender request, and here we're gonna get a 401 or a 403. So basically these are the three scenarios that we have currently. We're gonna expand on them more and more and more, but this is the ones that we currently have. So I hope this explains a bit why do we need JWT tokens, and why is it needed, and why actually we are implementing it. But let me just explain to you in general, why do we need JWT token in API rather than saving everything in a state very quickly. I already have another video, which it's going to be linked here somewhere, in case you want to delve way more deep into this. But for now, let us just do a quick overview before we continue with the coding, because it's really important to understand why are we implementing this kind of functionality, and when do we need to implement it and when not to implement it. Okay, so let's say we have a server. So let's say this is a nice server to have, and we have this nice server which contains a lot of information. And this server, right now we're just all hypothetical situation. So we have this nice server here and contain a lot of information, and basically we have users. Let's take this user. And we have 1, 2, 3 users, for example, for now. So, and all of these users are basically trying to log into this server. All of them at the same time are trying to log into this server. This is the traditional non-JWT token approach. So we have these three, and these three here, as we can see, basically are trying to actually log into this server. All of them at the same time. So what happens when they do log in here? So let's examine what's happening here. Apologies for this. Okay, so these three users send the username and a password, and it comes here to the server. So previously, what happens here, inside the server, the user will authenticate. So inside the server, this is what we're gonna say: server will authenticate the user. And then once that server has authenticated the user, what's gonna happen? Second, the server will store in the memory a record of the logged in user and send back to the user a like an ID, I want to say, or for example a session ID, and which match the one in the memory. So that's what's happening once the server authenticates. So basically, once the server authenticates, it basically just store the information. It create a session for that user and store its ID in the memory, because that session belongs to that user, and it sends back that session ID to the user here. Basically here it's in the browser. So let's see what happened after that. So after that, basically the user, which stands for the browser here, it actually saves the session ID in the token, in the cookie in the browser. And once it saved that session ID inside the cookie, every request that we do here is basically we have to send the session ID so we know the server will know it's authenticated. And this is all happen automatically. We don't have to worry about any of those. Because ASP.NET, prior to ASP.NET Core, used to have to do this specifically in web forms. So what happened here? So basically every request, the session ID is sent. And then once that session ID is sent back to the server, what does the server do to verify that this user so the server basically it's gonna check the memory, so basically it's gonna check the RAM to see if the ID is valid, and if in case it's valid, it check if it's still within the right correct time frame, and if it's actually belong to that user. So there's a conditioning that it needs to do. So there's some conditions, and if it matches this condition, it will process that request. If not, it will just log the user out. So these are basically, in a very high view, what happened prior to JWT. So this is not a stateless thing. Why it's not stateless? Because we keep everything inside the server memory. So what happened, let's say right now we have 3 users, but what happened if we have all of a sudden, instead of 3, we have 30,000 or 50,000 users simultaneously? The server will not be able to actually accommodate all of these requests, because in essence, we need a lot of actual hardware in order for us to meet this demand, because all of this information is being saved and tracked inside that one server. And basically, because it's actually inside a memory, so we need a lot of RAM, we need a lot of processing power, and it's gonna just, the cost is gonna go up and up and up. So you might think, okay, we don't want to scale up the server, we just want to get another server. So we can actually get another server to handle those requests, and that could be a solution. But let's see where the problem lies. So let's see, we have another, for example, 3 users. Let's take the same thing instead of wasting time and repeating them. So we have these here, and we have this one here. So these servers are completely, they are completely exactly the same. They are exactly the same instance of the application. But we have a big problem. And what is this big problem? So for example, let's say this user 1, let's make them so we understand the differences. User 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So what is this problem that we're currently having? So if, for example, user 1 authenticated with server 1, let's put this server 1, and this is server 2. So once that user 1 has authenticated to server 1, and server 1 suddenly got flooded with different incoming requests from different users, if we build this correctly, the request of user 1 should automatically be routed to the server with the most resources, which is going to be server 2. And once the user send the request to server 2, if we follow this exact same request, server 2 is going to check inside this memory for the session ID that the user 1 is going to send it. And it's not going to be there. So the server 2 is going to send back to the user 1 unauthorized, although the user 1 is already authorized. So that's going to create a very bad user experience, and it's going to create a lot of sessions and validations, because every session, it depends on which user they are, which server they are interacting with. It's going to request a complete different session, and this is going to be a complete mess. So one solution to solve this is, let's move this a bit back. Let's do this. Let's move this a bit back. Apologies. Is to have Redis or a cache, some kind of a cache. And the most common one is Redis. So what we can do here is something like this. Let's move these here and move these here. And basically what does this do? So all of the requests which is coming here are coming into the Redis, and then basically all of the sessions between this server and this server are shared. So we can update this. So this is gonna be, let's say this is gonna be version 1. I'm not sure why it's acting a bit weird. So copy this, and this is, let's say, the solution. And the solution for this is, once that session is saved here, we need to add an extra step. And this step, it's basically gonna be, we're gonna call it step 3. And it's gonna be basically, server will store the session ID in Redis, which is the cache. It's gonna be 3, it's gonna be 4, and this is gonna be 5. We're not gonna update 6 because there is more stuff that we need to do. Okay, so basically the request is gonna come to any user, so it's gonna come here or here, we don't really care. And basically the user will the server will authenticate this, and then once it's saved in the memory, it will save it in Redis, and it will send back the session ID to the user. So what happens if the requests come again? It goes to server 2. Server 2 basically, with every request, it will check if it's actually inside the memory or not. And let's put this as 6. It's a valid session ID inside the memory and Redis. So it will check in 2 places in order for it to make sure that this is a valid session. So right now, we are managing the session first in the server's memory, and now we are managing it inside the Redis cache, and then we are managing it as well inside the actual session in the browser of the user. So we have 3 places what we are actually managing the same session. So let's say user 1 now decided to actually log out and they don't want to continue their session. So we have 3 places that we need to update. First, we need to remove it from the server memory, and then we need to actually remove it from the Redis cache. And in case server 2 is actually synchronized and has a valid session, we need to send that request here in order for it to unauthorize that session or make it invalid, and then we need to unauthorize the session inside the user. So we can see here managing all of these sessions and managing all of these servers and setting up all of this caching, as well as managing the duplication, because this is only for 2 servers. Imagine if we have, for example, 10 servers running, and we have, for example, a failback switch, or for example, a failback cache in case this one goes bust, for example, and we need another one. So there's a lot of management where we need there's a lot of stuff that we need to do in order for us to make this work. And it's not as easy as just like setting up another server and make the routing work between them, because the sessions are very sensitive things. So this is why we can utilize JWT, because JWT basically will remove the idea of storing the session inside the server's memory. As we saw here, it all depends on the JWT token that the server provide, and this JWT token is like a ticket to make us to know if we are a valid user or not. In a video down the line, we're going to be discussing refresh tokens, how are we going to implement them, which basically means that whenever this token expired, I can get another token without actually logging in again. As well, we're going to be discussing roles and authorization. But for now, let us understand this JWT token in general and what stateless mean. So I hope this made sense. If you need more information, I will, as I said previously, there's another video you can watch. But now let's continue back to the code. So let's go back to Visual Studio Code. And we have already installed the first NuGet package. Now let's install the second one. And I think we already installed it, but let us see. So it's going to be .NET add package. It's going to be Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.identity.entity framework core. Okay, great. Then we're gonna utilize the .NET add package Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.identity.UI. Perfect. Now let's make sure these are installed successfully. So let's open this and we can go to CS Proj and we can see them here. I think we have already installed this here inside the data service. Let me double check, which is the entity framework core. Yes, we don't need it here. So let's remove it from here. We don't need it. Okay, let's save this and let us just build the application. So .NET build. Great. Now, since we have done that, now we need to start actually implementing the JWT. So the first thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding a key. And what is this key you might think of? So inside the app settings, we need to have some kind of a secret key, and this secret key is going to be utilized in order for us to encrypt or generate the JWT token. And this secret key is very, very, very important for us to have as secure. We need to secure it somewhere so no one else will be able to generate this token and actually try to imitate us or imitate the users. So for this reason, we need to create a secure key. For the purpose of this video, I'm gonna actually share with you the key because it's not gonna be uploaded online. It's not gonna be a valid application for now, but later on I'm gonna change it. But I'm gonna show you how we can create this key and how are we gonna utilize it. So inside the app settings, we're gonna create a new one and we're gonna create a new section, and this section is gonna be basically for JWT configuration. So we're gonna call it JWT config, and here what we're going to be doing is we're going to add the secret, and this secret is basically a key that we're going to be using in order for us to encrypt and or create the JWT token. So let's go back to our web browser, and I think I remember there was I think it was called the browser link random string. Let me check if that's still correct. Yeah. So basically, this is a nice website which basically allow us to create randomized strings, and it's very simple. That's why I like it. So let's have here, and we want the key to basically be 32 characters. So let's change this to 32. Let's generate. So let's generate. I think that should be fine. And let's copy it to clipboard, and let's go back to Visual Studio Code and paste it here. So that's gonna be for now our secret in order for us to generate this JWT token. Great. So the next step is we're gonna be actually mapping this JWT config into an entity so we can actually utilize it inside the startup class. Let's see how this is done, and then we can explain it as we go. So inside the API notebook here, we're going to create a new folder, and this folder we're going to call it configuration. And inside this, I'm going to create another folder, and I'm going to call it models. And inside this models folder, I'm going to create a class, and I'm going to call it JWT config. And inside this class, it's going to be the exact same representation of what we have here. So we're going to have a string called secret. So prop and string, and we're just gonna make it secret. So basically we're creating the exact same structure from the app settings into the JWT config class that we have created. Once we have done that, now we need to update our startup class in order for us to utilize this. So inside the startup class, inside the configure services method, let's do that here on top before we do anything else. Let us take the configuration that we have from the app settings and save it inside that JWT config. So how do we do this? Add a comment here, update the JWT config with the setting from the second, okay, great. So we're gonna do services dot configure, and we're gonna put here JWT config, and basically we're gonna be utilizing the configuration get collection, configuration dot get section collection, and here we're just gonna pass which section that we want from the configuration. It's gonna be JWT config. Now let's fix those references, and perfect. Now let's save this and let us build this. So .NET build. Okay, perfect. This means that it's working as it should be. So now that it has built successfully and it's working as it should be, what we did is we just brought the configuration from the app settings into our startup class. So the next step for us is actually to do all of the configuration that we need in order for us to make JWT token works. Because currently we don't have any authentication inside our application. So we need to actually configure this and add this to our application inside our startup class. So for this, to accomplish this, we're gonna be adding more stuff into our configure services method. And the first thing we're gonna be doing is, after everything here, after the API versioning, we're gonna be adding services dot add authentication, and we're gonna be basically building the authentication configuration from here. So the first thing that we're gonna be adding is the default authentication scheme. And the default authentication scheme that we're gonna be using is, it's gonna be JWT bearer defaults dot authentication scheme. Let us fix those references, and perfect. Let's see this one. Okay, great. So once we have done that, the second one is going to be option dot default scheme, and this one is also going to be JWT bearer defaults dot authentication scheme, similar to the first one. And the third one here is going to be option dot default challenge scheme, and this one is equal going to be JWT bearer defaults dot authentication scheme. Great. So what does these means, the three of them? Default authentication scheme, default scheme, and default challenging scheme. So let us see here. Let's remove this and let's see this request. So basically this JWT bearer default, it means that we are telling ASP.NET Core that in order for us to utilize any authentication or any authorization that we want to implement in the future, we need to basically build everything on JWT. And in order for ASP.NET to understand what does that mean, inside the ASP.NET Core framework, we have something called the scheme. And this scheme basically is like a blueprint of all of the different mechanisms that the framework needs to understand in order for it to authenticate and in order for it to generate and build up JWT tokens. So basically what we're doing is we're providing these blueprints that we currently have to like the default blueprint, the default authentication blueprint, the default as well as the challenge blueprint, all of them the same. It's going to be the JWT bearer default authentication scheme. So right now ASP.NET Core know that for any authentication request that's going to come its way, it's going to be utilizing JWT. So that's the first thing. So now everything related to the authentication here, as we know and as we said right now, it's going to be based on the JWT bearer default authentication scheme. That's for the authentication. But now we need to configure the actual bearer token and how it's going to be generated and how it's actually going to be utilized. So let's do this now. So after this, we're going to add JWT bearer, and we need to actually configure that JWT bearer. So we'll put JWT, and let's do this here like this. And let us add now the configuration that we want. So the first thing is we need to get the key. And if you remember here, we just did it. We just inherited, or we just imported the JWT configuration with the secret. So we need to actually bring the secret into the JWT bearer configuration in order for us to generate those JWT keys. So how do we do that? So first we put var key. It means that we're going to generate a key. We have a variable called key, which is going to be importing it. And then we're going to utilize the encode. I think it's encoding, yeah, dot ASCII2 dot get bytes. And then basically what we're going to be doing is going to be taken from the configuration, and we're going to just basically take JWT config, and we're going to put secret. And let us fix this. Perfect. So here basically, let's add a comment, getting the secret from the config. So currently we have put the secret, just a pin note here. We have put the secret inside the app settings. But usually what you need to do is you need to utilize your system variables. So because you don't really want to commit these JWT configuration into your source code, so the better option is to actually save it in your system settings. So you can do something like .NET add user dash settings, and you can name it, for example, this is JWT config secret, and then you put the entire secret here and you save it. This is a more secure way to do it because it's actually save it inside your computer. It does not actually save it inside the, it save it in a hidden value inside your computer. It doesn't save it inside the app settings. So if you want to commit your code, you don't actually share this with everyone. And once you deploy it either on like Azure or AWS or any of the cloud provider, you can actually put this in the secret value there, so you don't have to worry about the about managing the secret inside your source code. There's just like a note that you should know, but for the demonstration purposes, we're actually adding it directly to the app settings. So once we have added the secret key here, the next step is actually adding some configurations. So we're going to put JWT.save token, and I'm going to say equal true. So what does save token mean? So let's hover and see. So save token means that after authorization, do you want to save this token? So basically, does this JWT token that we have, is it going to be saved inside the authentication property? Yes, we want to save it inside the authentication property because we're going to be using it. So that's the first thing. Then we're going to add now the token validation parameters. So JWT.token validation parameters. And now we're going to actually add a lot of the configuration here. So new token validation parameter. And let's configure this. But before we do this, I don't like this one here. So let's remove this. And let's add them using. And that should be fine. Okay, so the first thing that we're gonna be adding to the validation parameters is the signage key. So it's gonna be validate is it issuer key? Let's check. Where is it? This one, validate issuer signing key. Okay, so this one is gonna be equal true. And why is this equal true? Because basically what this means is once we receive the JWT token back, so let's come to the browser again. So basically it means once we send here the request with the JWT token, the utilizing the secret that we currently have, it's actually gonna verify. So if we don't do this, it's just gonna accept any JWT token to a certain extent. But if we have this, it's basically gonna get the JWT token. It's gonna validate it against the secret to see if that token has actually been generated utilizing this secret or not. And if it is, it's gonna allow it. If not, it's gonna reject it. So this is why it means validate issuer signing key. It means that it actually gonna validate the key that we currently have with the secret that we have saved, and see if that key, if that JWT token is generated utilizing that key. If it's not generated, with that key, it's gonna reject it. If it is, it's gonna allow it to continue. So that's the first thing. The second thing is gonna be issuer signing key, and this is gonna be new, say metric security key, and here we're gonna pass the key. So what does this mean? So it's very easy. As we can see here, the key refers back to the secret that we got from the app settings. And what this means here is actually we're taking the key from the app setting and we're saving it. So once the application starts, it actually check all of the configuration that it needs. It checked that, oh, there's a secret key that I need for the JWT configuration. It will get that JWT configuration. It will actually add it to the JWT configs, and it will keep a copy of that key once that application is running. It will keep a copy of that key inside the configuration. So once the application starts, so let's do a quick recap. So currently we have the secret inside the configuration. The application start, it will check all of its dependency. Once it checks all of the dependency, it will look here, oh, I need to have the secret for the JWT to be available with me anytime that I want in order for me to generate tokens. So what it does here, it actually take a copy of it, so utilizing here from the configuration, and then it will save it inside the parameters of the JWT token, which is here, in order for it to make it available, so it doesn't have to read it every time. That's a bit of a simplified explanation, but in essence it means that it's gonna take a copy, it gets the copy of the key that it's going to be using in order for it to validate. And as we can see here from the description, it says get or set the security key, which is the one we have with the secret, that's going to be used for signature validation. Okay, great. So after that, we're going to have, say, validate issuer. For now, we're going to say no, but we're going to update it later on. Let's put here to do update. Why is this validate issuer? Because currently we're gonna be in debug mode. We're gonna go through a lot of different steps, but once we actually go into production, we're gonna be actually changing this feature. But for now, we're gonna put it as no. That's why we put the to do to update. Then we're gonna put validate audience, because we have not specified any audience so far. So we're gonna say false as well, and we're gonna add, similar to this, we need to update. We need to specify, this is going to be a more advanced configuration, but we're going to add a specific audience who will be able to consume this API and actually send those JWT token. But for now, we're just not going to do it. The third one is going to be require expiration time. Again, because it's all in debug, we're going to say false, but we're going to add this because we need to update it. And then the last thing that we're going to be doing is validate lifetime, because basically we don't want a JWT token which is 1 year old to actually use the application. The user need to relog in. So for that, we're going to put true. So these are the basics configuration that we want to have here. So first of all, it's going to be, we need to validate the issuer signing key, which is of course. Then we need to take a copy of the security key that we have. Then we set the validate issuer audience and expiration time. No, because we're still in debug mode or development mode. So we don't really want to do this right now, but we added a to-do list to update it later on. And validate the lifetime, because we need to actually be able to control the lifespan of our JWT token. Great. So once we have added this, So the next step is for us to add the identity, because currently with the authentication that we currently want to implement, we want to implement the ASP.NET Core identity framework, which is provided for us within ASP.NET Core. In order for us to configure this with a JWT token, we need to add this functionality. So here we need to put services.default add default identity, and we're going to be utilizing the identity user, which is going to be the default users that we currently have with the identity framework that ASP.NET Core provide. And how can we use this? How can we use that? If we look at our application DB context, we can utilizing the identity DB context, and the identity DB context mean that we have created all of the correct tables inside our database, which is going to be ASP.NET Core user, claims, roles, so on and so forth. And because we have this, we can actually utilize the identity user here. So once we have added that, now we need to add the options. And basically the options are gonna be as required. We need what do we want to add as some kind of a confirmation. So we're just gonna put options dot sign in dot require confirmed email or confirmed account equal true. And basically once we have added that, let's fix those references here. Why it's not letting me? Okay, maybe once we actually finish setting this up, we're gonna put dot add entity framework store, and we're gonna pass the app db context, and then we're gonna close it. So let's see if we can fix those references now. Yes, we can, and we're utilizing the identity one. And let's put this here on a different line. So let's put this something like this. Okay, so let's see what happened here. So the first thing is we have added default identity. So we have injected, because basically here what we're doing is we're adding all of this to the IOC container, and basically we are adding some middlewares, and we're telling them that they need to be available for us. And currently we are utilizing the identity one, and we're telling it that we need to add a default identity provider. And then basically what we did here is we identified which type of user, which is going to be the identity user, which come out of the box. And then basically one of the options that we require is that we require the account to be confirmed in order for it to be utilized. And then once that has happened, we are actually adding the entity framework store. So basically we are utilizing the entity framework identity stuff within the application DB context. So once we have added all of these, right now we need to go back to the configure, and we need to add app authorization. Oh, we already have this here. So we have authorization, but let us add this one, app.add authentication. So we need to add authentication as well as we need to add authorization. So let's see this one, why it's not happening. Use authentication. Apologies for this. So here we added authentication, and now we have authorization. So once we have done this, let us build this to make sure that it's building correctly. .NET build. Okay, great. We still have this one warning, which we're gonna be tackling later on, but now let us do a .NET run to see if it runs. Perfect. Let's go back to Insomnia, and let us get all users. It should get us the same thing. We haven't implemented any restriction now. Everything is open and perfect. Oh, we didn't save this. Let's save. Let's do this all over again. .NET run, and let's go back to Insomnia, and let's check it here. Okay, perfect. Okay, once we have done that, we added all of the information that we currently have for the JWT token authentication inside our startup class. The next step for us is to actually start implementing the login process and the registration process. So the first thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing a bit of refactoring first. So let's go back here and let us create a new class library. So .NET new Classlib, and we'll give it a name of صحة capital S notebook. We'll call it .jwt. Or we can call it .authentication, better. Authentication. صحة notebook .authentication. Okay. Once we create this class library, perfect. Now let's add reference to صحة notebook.api to this one. So .NET add reference. It's gonna be صحة notebook.api. API صحة notebook. Put reference. Put صحة notebook. What did we call it? Authentication. صحة notebook.authentication. .NET add reference. Oh, without the reference here. Apologies, let's remove the word reference. Okay, this should be fine. And now, perfect. Now if we open this, we should see a reference to the new class library, authentication. Great. So inside this authentication class library, let's delete this class one. We don't want it. Delete by, and then we're gonna be basically creating a new folder, and this folder we're gonna call it configuration, and basically it's gonna be the same one as here. So let's create a new class, and we're gonna call it JWT configuration, and we're just gonna take the same thing as this one and here. And basically we're gonna delete all of this. We don't need it here. Bye bye. And the startup class, we need to update it. So instead of being API, it's gonna be authentication and without models. Okay, great. So now once we have added this, now let's add what we originally wanted to do. So let's add another folder here. Add folder. And we're gonna call this DTOs. So DTOs, or we can call it models. And inside this models folder, we're gonna create a DTO. So inside this here, we're gonna create DTOs, and DTO stands for data transfer objects. And inside this DTO, we're gonna create two folders. One is gonna called incoming, and another one is gonna be called outgoing. The data transfer object for an incoming request to our server, and the outgoing is anything that the API is actually generating. So that's what means incoming and outgoing. So and let's put here another one. New folder, we'll call it generic. Okay, so now inside the generic folder, we're gonna create a new class, and this one is gonna called auth result. And basically the auth result means that no matter what the object is, or basically whenever we do any authorization, or should it be here? It shouldn't be here. I think it should be in the outgoing. Because basically once the user has authenticated, we authenticate with it. Yeah, so let's put it inside the outgoing and create a new class, and we'll call it auth result. So basically once we send the username and a password, this is going to be in the incoming. To the login, we need to send the result back, and this is going to be the DTO that we send back. And basically here we're going to have three things. So first it's going to be a string, and it's going to be token, which is going to be the JWT token. Second, it's going to be a boolean, which is going to be the result. See if it actually has result or not. Result. Okay. And lastly, so basically if it's true, it means that we have
a result, which is the token. So we don't really need to check for an error. If not, the token has not been generated and there's an issue. So instead of result, maybe we can call it success. And here, for example, lastly, we can put prop, and it's going to be a list of strings. Basically, if there's any errors, we're going to send these errors back to the user so they will be able to see them. So that's the first thing. Okay, great. Let's see, collection generic. Okay, perfect. Now we're gonna be starting adding more of our DTOs. So the first thing, it's gonna be the registration DTO, because we need to collect user information in order for us to create an account for them. And basically, we're gonna create a controller, and then we're gonna create an action inside this controller. It's gonna be called registration. And for this registration action, it's gonna require some kind of information like the email, the password, the first name, the last name, so on and so forth. So in order for us to create that, we need to create an incoming DTO. So inside the incoming folder, we create a new class, and this one we're gonna be calling it user registration request DTO. Okay, great. So what are we gonna be doing here? We're just gonna require the information that we want from the user. So inside the users table, what did we add? Did we require, I put first name, last name? Let's check. So if we open here, the data, no, should be inside entities. Oh, we have already here. Oh, that's for the user. Okay, so that's fine. It has first name, last name. So let's request the first name, last name. So here inside the user registration, so it's going to be property string first name, property string last name, and we're going to be asking for string, which is going to be the email address, and string, we're going to be asking for the password. And let's make these required. So these are attributes that we add, that annotation attributes, and these basically we're going to be utilized inside the validate model inside our action, which we're going to be covering. So basically it means that if we receive this object from the user and has any of these fields missing, it's going to request it, because it's going to reject it, because it's going to be an invalid model. So let's have this now. And basically the next step is we're going to be adding the response model. So basically once the registration has completed successfully, we need to send back the response. So inside the outgoing here, inside the authentication, so the auth result is this one. So what we can do here is we can create a new class, and this class could be, for example, registration user registration response. So we can have the same format, user registration response. And this user registration response is gonna basically inherit the auth results, because we just want the same information. We don't really want more. In case we want anything here, we can add, but for now, let's utilize the same thing that we have from the auth result. And I think this is it for the models. So once we have done all of those, let's just build this. So let's navigate back to our Soha notebook.api. And let's just do a .NET build to make sure that we didn't mess anything up. Sorry, I mistyped build. Okay, build successful. Great. Once we have done that, now the next step for us is we need to create our authentication API. So inside our controllers, inside the v1, should we keep the authentication inside the v1? Because basically it's not really gonna change a lot. It could be more of a generic one. Because okay, let's keep it inside the v1, and we can come to this decision later on. Okay, so new class, and we're gonna call this auth management, or we can just say authentication management. Oh, it's gonna be a lot, so let's call it accounts. Similar to the old days, AccountsController. Okay, so inside that AccountsController, basically what we're gonna be doing is similar to what we did before. Let us take this from here. Yeah, let us utilize directly the base controller. So let's inherit from the base controller. And basically we need to do the same thing as we did for the users one. So let's copy this constructor instead of us recreating it again, and let's update the name, and that should be fine. And now let us fix those references. So inside unit of work, okay, unit of work, base content, okay. So that's the first thing that we're gonna be doing. The second thing is, what we need to do here is we need to actually bring in the, we need to bring in the JWT configuration here. So how do we do that? We need to bring in the user manager, and the user manager class here is basically a class which is built into the ASP.NET Core framework. So how do we do that? So private, and then we're gonna put read only, and then we're gonna put user manager, and once we do that, we're gonna put identity user, which is gonna be the default user that we have, which is provided, and we're gonna put user manager. So this is what the first one that we want. Let's fix those references. Let's fix it all, yes. And let's copy this because we can directly put it inside the constructor. So let's make the constructor look nicer. And we can put this like this. And we can put this like this. And this would be like this. Okay, and here what we can do is we can put underscore user manager equal user manager. So that way we are utilizing the user manager, which is a class provided for us by ASP.NET Core Identity in order for us to utilize it, to utilize the identity framework inside our application. So that's the first thing we want. The second thing is we want to actually bring the information of the JWT secrets that we currently have in our settings in order for us to create those. So how do we do that? Also, it's going to be very simple. So here we're going to be private, read only JWT config, and we're going to call it JWT config. Let's fix those references. Okay, great. Let's save this. And here, similarly, we're going to be adding this, which is going to be, I think it's going to be the options. Let's check it out. Options monitor. Let's fix this reference. Option monitor. Okay, and let's put here JWT config, and we're gonna call it option monitor. So why is this not identified? I think it's options. Yes, options monitor. Okay, great. So once we have done this, now we need to actually import it. So JWT equal options monitor dot current value. So what does this do? It basically connect. Basically, what we're doing here is with the options monitor is we're connecting to the app settings. And basically we're pulling some information out from it because we have already added it here inside the startup class. If you remember, where is the startup class? Because we have already added it here. So it's already inside our dependency injection structure. So what we're doing inside the accounts controller is we're just getting the current value of the JWT config and pulling it back and put it inside this value so we can actually use it. Okay, so the first action that we're going to be doing is let's create a comment here, the register action. And basically, because it's a registration, we're going to be requiring it's going to be a post, so HTTP post, and then basically we need to do the route for it. So we're gonna put route, and it's gonna be basically register, and we're gonna be building up. So public async task I action result, and it's gonna be register. Let's make a space, and we're gonna make it from body because we're gonna request the JSON body, and we're gonna be requiring the input. So the incoming one, which is gonna be the user registration request DTO. So we're gonna put here, we're gonna put here the user registration request DTO, and we're gonna put here registration DTO. Okay, and let's create this action. Now let's fix these issues. Oh no, let's put the, okay, let's fix this first. Let's use the MVC, and let's fix this one, and let's fix this one. Okay, I think that should be fine. Okay, great. So the first thing that we're going to be doing here, once we do this, is we need to check the state of the model that we have. If you remember, inside the user registration request DTO, which is this one, we have added these required attributes. And basically, these attributes or data annotation tell us that these fields are required and we need to have them. So here, with our first thing is we need to check that we are actually abiding by those. So we're going to be saying check the model or object we are receiving is valid. So how do we do that? It's very simple. If model dot state dot is valid, so if it is valid, we'll continue. Else, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be returning an error. So else, let's put here invalid object. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be returning a JSON response, and we're going to put, let's put a bad response. So return bad request, and basically this bad request is going to contain the error one that we have, the response. So it's going to be new register, what is it called, register user registration response. So user registration response, let's fix this reference, and basically we're gonna be populating it. So first of all, it's gonna be, the token is gonna be empty, so we're not gonna put it if success equal false because it's not successful. And the errors, what we're gonna be doing is we're gonna say errors, we're gonna put a new list of strings, and basically we're gonna add the first error here is gonna say invalid payload, and I think that should be fine. Let's return this, let's put this here. I think that should be fine. Okay, so why is it an invalid payload? Because the model said that it's not valid, so maybe we are missing one of the requests. So that's the first thing that we're gonna need to check. So the second thing is, once we actually verify that this is a all of the fields are there, the next step for us is to actually start with the registration process. So first we're going to be doing is we need to check if the email already exists. So the email that the user is sending, we need to check if it's already exists. And then once we check that, the next thing is we need to add the user in case it fails. And then once that we add the user, we need to create a JWT token. And once we create the JWT token, we need to return it back to the user. Okay. So how do we check if the email already exists? And for that, we're going to be utilizing the user manager class, which is provided for us by default from ASP.NET Core. So the first thing we're going to be doing is we're going to for var exist user exist equal, and then we're going to put await because it's an async request. We're going to put user manager dot find by email async, simple as that. And we're going to be passing it the DTO, which is going to be the registration DTO dot email. And basically this one here, what is it going to do? Let's open DB Beaver. So it's going to be DB and open. It's always better to see it in action and what actually is going on. So let's just wait until DB Beaver starts. Okay, I think this is the right one. Yes. So let's put tables. And as we can see here, in our previous video, we added those tables when we did the first migration. And one of them here is going to be ASP.NET users. And this ASP.NET users table is what the identity framework inside ASP.NET Core utilized to see if this actually is a valid, to keep track of the registered user, to keep track of the status of them, if they are valid, invalid, if they are locked out, so on and so forth. So right now, in order for us to check if the email is registered, we need to check inside this table if this user exists or if this email exists. So if we see it, we can see that inside of this we have an username field, and the username field here means the email. So we have username and email, basically they are the same thing, and we this is where it actually check if the email already exists or not. So this method here, username.find by email async, it means that it will take this email, it will go to this table here, and it will check, does this email exist in the table? If it exists in the table, it's going to send back to the user that it already exists. You cannot register again with the same email. If it doesn't exist, it will allow it. So right now what we're going to be doing here is, let us come here, and then we need to add the logic to check if it actually exists or not. So we're going to say user exists. So if it's not null, which means that the user exists. So let's add this comment here. User email is already in the table. So it means that we need to send back to the user that it's an invalid email, they cannot register with it again. We need to send similar a bad request. So we're going to say return bad request, and we're going to put a new user registration response. We did not add DTO. Oh, I just remembered this. Let's add it now before we continue any further. So let's go to the user registration response. Let's put here a DTO, because it's really important to keep consistency of the code. So if we have one pattern, we need to make sure that it's followed up everywhere. So let's put a DTO here, as simple as that. And this is going to create issues here, which is fine. We just need to update it to DTO. We'll update it here as well to DTO, as simple as that. No worries. And now here, once we added those, basically we need to populate it. So success equal false. And the errors, basically what we can do is we can take the user exists error, that's going to say it exists. So we're going to say errors equal new list of strings, similar to what we did before. And let's open it up. And inside of here, we're going to put two things. The first thing we're going to be adding is we're going to say that email already in use. And then here, I forgot to add the word if. Safe. Okay, great. So this is the first condition, and we have added it. So the second one is, once we have passed this condition and we made sure that the email is not it's inside our tables. What we need to do here is we need to actually add the user. So how do we do that? Also, we're going to be utilizing the user manager class that we have here. So we're going to put var new user equal await underscore user manager dot r. This is a second step. So first we're gonna need to create a new identity user. So new identity user, and basically, apologies, here we're just gonna say email equal registration DTO dot email. Then we're gonna say, should we say the confirmation from now? Let's put the username equal registration DTO dot email. It's gonna be the same thing, and we should actually confirm that email that it's valid, but we haven't not add the send request. So let's do this. So where is this one? Email confirmed. So for now, I'm gonna put true, but we're gonna here add a to-do list, which is basically gonna tell us to build email functionality to send to the user to confirm email. So this is what we're gonna be doing. So maybe let us add this as a generic point here in our web browser. So let's go back to, where is it? To Edge. And let's add a ticket just quickly. And we'll add, so we don't forget, send email to confirm. It's not send email to confirm user's email address. And okay, so here we need to say send an email to the user so they can confirm their email address. And then here what we need to do is we need to basically say that we need to add an endpoint which which confirm the email address. We need to update the user registration and to remove the, what was it? To remove the default verification of emails. I think that's like a good generic ones. Let's create this for now, and then we'll, so we don't forget about it. Yes, okay, let's go back to our source code now. Okay, anything else do you want to add? Let's see. So let's add a comma here. And is there anything else we want to add? So lookout, add normalization, phone number. We don't want any of this. Okay, that should be fine. Okay, so once we have added this, let's delete this. So after we have created the new identity user, now we need to actually save it. So var, we're gonna say is created equal, again, await. We're gonna utilize the user manager class dot create async. And basically we're gonna pass the new user that we have, and we're gonna be passing the password that the user has sent, which is gonna be registration DDO dot password. Okay, great. So here is actually we're gonna be adding the user to the table. So once we have added this, now we need to check if it has added successfully. So how do we do that? It's very simple. So put if is created dot succeeded, which means that it has completed successfully. We can actually here generate. So let's do this. If not, so if it's not created successfully, we need to send an error, and basically we're gonna send a bad request. So here what we're gonna be doing is we can just say return new. So should we return a bad request? Yeah, bad request I think is better. Bad request without the new. So bad request, and we're gonna say return new user registration response DTO, and basically here we're gonna fill this. So how are we gonna be doing this? So it's gonna be first success equal false. Well, basically it's gonna be is created dot success succeeded, because it's gonna equal false, and then the errors, it's gonna be equal new list of strings, and or what we can do, because if it's not has created successfully, so it's created dot errors dot basically, let's see, what is it? It's gonna be unremovable list of errors. So that should be fine. So what we can do, we can actually select all of the errors and send it back. So we're gonna put select, which is here we're gonna utilize link, and we're gonna put x dot, I think it's, let's fix this so we can see the options that we get. It's either title or description. So it's gonna be code, or let's say code, so description, and once we do this we can put dot to list, and that's it. I think here we need something else. No, should be fine. So what are we doing here? Basically, because this has not been created successfully, password is wrong. See, you learn something new every day. So we type password wrong inside the user registration DTO. So let's fix this. So it's password, okay. And here did I spelled it somewhere? Okay, that's fine. So what we're doing here, because this has not been created successfully, the user manager class will actually gonna generate the errors that it has faced. It could be a password related issue or many other stuff. And basically what we're doing here is we're extracting them from that, and we're just getting the description and sending it back. So this is in case it fails. So this is when the registration has failed. So the last step that we need to do is we need to actually now create the JWT token, because we have passed all of the checks, and now we are not allowed, because we have made sure that we have passed all of the condition. Now we are actually able to create the JWT token. So let us create a new method which is going to be responsible for creating this JWT token, because if you think about it, this JWT token is going to be reused in many different places. So we're going to put the private string, we're going to call it generate JWT token, and it's going to only take the identity user, because we're going to be basing it on that, and we're going to call it user. Okay, so in order for us to generate the JWT token, there's a lot of steps that we need to do in order for us to get to that token. And trust me, although it's going to seem a lot of steps that we need to do, but every single one of them has a valid role in order for us to get there. So the first thing is we're going to be creating the handler. And basically the handler means it's going to be like the function or the actually, we're gonna say it's gonna be like, let's write it and we can explain it. So far we're gonna put JWT handler equal new, we're gonna call it a new JWT security token handler. Okay, let's import this. Okay, so what does this mean? So this is gonna be like this variable here. It's gonna utilize all of the functionality inside the JWT handler class in order for it to actually generate. It's gonna be like the main method or the main class to a certain extent, or that is going to be the main object that we're going to utilize in order for us to generate the token. So the handler is going to be let's add it here, a comment. It's going to be the handler is going to be responsible for creating the token. because everything else we're gonna create after is gonna all feed back into the handler. So once we did that, the second thing is we need to get, so here instead of this thing, we need to get the security key, and this security key is the one that we have added inside the app settings. So var key equal, it's going to be the same thing that we use in the startup class, so it's going to be encoding. Let's fix those references. Okay, dot ASCII2 dot get bytes, and then we're gonna say JWT config dot secret. So basically we're doing the same thing, but just because this JWT config here, as we said earlier, it has automatically populated for us in the startup class, and we're just utilizing it here through dependency injection. So here we're just getting the secret from there. And once we have done that, the next step is we need to define our token descriptor. So var token descriptor equal new security token descriptor. Let's fix this. Okay, and let's create this and close it here. So you might think to yourself, what is a security token descriptor? So basically, the security token descriptor, or the JWT token descriptor, it's gonna be the all of the configuration or all of the settings that our JWT token will have. Although we have specified them inside our startup class, it will inherit from those configuration, and it will add a lot of more stuff to it here. So basically we're gonna define to whom this token belongs to. We're gonna add some claims here. We're gonna actually generate more information from the server and attach it to the descriptor by itself. And we're gonna add, for example, the expiry time. We're gonna add the signature, and so on and so forth. So the first thing that we're gonna have, and we can see here we have a lot of stuff, and you can see here some of the things that we currently have here is matching to what we have added in the startup class. So the first thing is we're gonna add the subject. And what is the subject? So let's hover it up on of it, and we can see that the subject is a collection of initializers. And what does this mean? So basically the collection of initializers means it's gonna contains a lot of claims, and the claims are basically key value pairs that we are actually utilizing in order for us to provide some information about this JWT token. So let's say subjects equal new claims identity, and basically what we can do is it's gonna be equal to new, I think it's gonna take an array, and we can take it from there. So let's fix those references. Okay, and is it like this? Yes. So first, within this array, let's put a new claim, and it's gonna be the ID, and basically it's gonna be just user.id. So this is the first claim. As we said, the claims are like a key value pair that we have. The second one is gonna be new claim, and we're gonna put, for example, JWT registered claimed names dot sub, and we're gonna put user.email. So this is the second one. New claim is gonna be similar, JWT registered claims names dot, I think it's email. We need to add user.email. Okay, just to confirm another point here as well, sub mean here is gonna be a unique ID. So because every email is unique, so sub refers to a unique ID other than the email address. So it's one way or another. We can put an ID, we can put email, we can put whenever we want, as long as it's unique to this user. So once we have added the sub and the email, the next step is we're gonna add the JT. So let's add this. So it's gonna be new claim, and basically here it's gonna be JWT, similar to what we had before, registered claimed names dot GTI or GT, no matter how you want to say it. And basically here, this is going to be the ID that we want to send. So it's going to be gwid dot new gwid. And basically, this is going to be like a unique identifier for this specific token. It's not for a specific user, it's for this specific token. And here we're going to say, because there's no gwid is the same, so we can use this, so .toString. And basically once we do that, let us just fix those references. And now what we have added the 4 claims that we want here. So just one more thing that I want to add to this point is, down the road, we're going to be adding roles, we're going to be adding more of an authorization. So we're going to adding more claims. But for now, I think this is going to be the basic claims that we're going to be needing in order for us to actually create a JWT token. As well, the another aspect of this, the GTI or JT is utilized with a refresh token, which is going to be adding in the next video. And the refresh token, as we said earlier, it will allow us to basically get a new token without actually letting the user logging in and generating a JWT token. So once that token is expired, it will allow us to actually generate a new token utilizing the refresh token without requiring the user to register again. So let's add this information here. So we can say used by the refresh token. Okay, good. So once we have added the claims identity, now we need to add the expiration date. So let's add a comma. We put expires, and usually a good amount for a JWT token to live is up to 5 minutes. So basically, JWTs is something called a short-lived token, and a short-lived token means that they live for a very short amount of time. 5 minutes is like a moderate amount. On the other hand, the refresh tokens are long-lived token, which they can live up to, for example, a day or like a month or 6 months, no matter how long we want them to live. And basically, it's always a good idea to keep the timing of a JWT token very short. But because we are in development right now, we're going to make it a bit long for like, let's say, a few hours. But we're going to add a to-do list so we can actually update this down the road. So we're going to say datetime dot UTC now dot add, and we're just going to add hours, and we're just going to make it for 3 hours. But we're going to add a to-do and update the expiration time 2 minutes. Okay. So once we have added that, the last thing that we want to add within this is the signing credentials. And basically, it's going to be the algorithm or encryption algorithm that we're going to be utilizing to generate the token based on the information that we are providing. So we're going to take the key, we're going to take the information that the user has provided, and based on that, we're going to have some kind of an algorithm, and this algorithm is going to be responsible to create the JWT token for us. So we're going to utilize the signing credentials, and we're going to say equal, and it's going to be new signing credentials. And basically, we're going to be utilizing a new symmetric security key. And basically, we're going to pass the key that we're going to base this encryption on. And we're going to pass the key. And then we're going to pass other configuration of what type of algorithm that we want to use. And I think there's a lot of different algorithms, but we're going to put security algorithm, and you can see here there's a lot of algorithm that we can actually utilize to do this encryption. Currently, I prefer to utilize the 256 encryptions, so it's not with the HMAC, so it's going to be the HMAC, not the AES, HMAC 256 signature. So I think that's a good algorithm to utilize. If you want more secure, you can go to the 512, but for this demo purposes, I think the 256 is enough. You need to think about one thing is there is always going to be some kind of a compromise. So the more complicated the algorithm, the more time it's going to take to process, the more time it's going to take for this key to be generated. and the lower the number, so instead of 256, if we use, for example, 128, it's going to be less secure, but it's gonna be way faster. If we use 512, it's going to be more secure, but it's going to take more processing power and it's going to take more time to generate. So we need to do like the right balance, because this is going to be like, for now it's demo, 256 enough, but it doesn't mean that we might not to update it. So let's add a to do, and we can say review the algorithm down the road. It doesn't hurt to review it later on. So once we have added these and we have actually added the signing credential, the token descriptor should be now ready. So the token descriptor, as we said, it contains all of the information that we want in order for us to create the token. So from the claims, that basically the information that's going to be identifying the user, and then to the expiry time, to the actual algorithm that we're going to be using in order for us to create this token. So once we have added those, the next step is we're going to be basically actually now generating the token. So var token equal, we're going to be utilizing the token handler that we utilized before. So it's going to be JWT, what do we call it? JWT handler. And we're going to put create token, yes, and we're gonna pass a token descriptor. Perfect. And once we have created the token, now we need to actually generate. So it's gonna be a two-step process. So that create token, if we hover here, it's gonna basically return a security token, and the security token is not like the actual. It's gonna be like an object. Which contain a lot of bytes and information, so it's not the same object that we want to return. So basically here it generates the security token, but here, for example, we put var JWT token. It's gonna be basically, you're gonna take this secure object that we have created, and we're gonna convert the security object to an actual token that we can actually utilize, to an actual string that we can actually utilize. So we're gonna utilize the token handler again, and we're gonna say utilize the right token, and we're gonna pass the token for it. So we're gonna convert basically the security token into a token, to a string. So security object token here, object token into a string that we can actually utilize, and then we're gonna just return this JWT token, and that should be enough for here. So now let's take this method and let's utilize it. So we can put here var token equal, and we're just gonna pass the user, which I have created. We're gonna basically call user, and basically all of this is gonna end up by, for us to, it's not gonna be a bad request. Actually, it's gonna be we're gonna return a 200, or because we have created, we might want to return like a 201. So, but for now, let us return a 200 new. So it's gonna be return okay, and this okay, basically we're gonna take a new object. So new user registration response DTO, and basically what we're gonna be returning here is what will be finally success equal true, because it has been successful. We're gonna be returning the token, which is what we want, and this token is gonna be basically token. Perfect. So now that we have created this registration form, let us build and see if everything built successfully. So .NET build. Great, now it has built successfully. Let's put .NET run. And now let us try to actually register a user. .NET run, it's running. Let's go back to Insomnia. And let's create a new folder here, and this folder we're gonna call it account, because we're gonna use it for everything. And inside this account, let's create a new request, and we're gonna call it register, and this is gonna be a post, and it's gonna take a JSON body. We're gonna call it create. So let's copy the URL from here, copy paste, and it's gonna be account, and it's gonna be register. And basically what we're gonna do, let's see, what are we gonna be passing here? We said we're gonna pass the user registration request, so it's gonna be first name, last name, email, and password. So let's put first name, it's gonna be, let's say, Mohamad. Last name, it's gonna be Lawand. And we're gonna put email. For now, we're just gonna put any dumb email. We're gonna put Mohamad@email1122.com, and let's choose a password. We're gonna put password. Okay, 11. Okay, I think that should be enough. Now let's send this. Perfect. Everything worked as it should be. We generated the token. We have the success, and we got the token that we wanted. Okay. So we have been speaking a lot of the JWT tokens, but what are they specifically? So let's copy this token that we have generated. Let's go back to our web browser. And inside our web browser, let's go to jwt.io. Let us require only the required cookies. Okay. Close. So here basically, let's paste the token that we had here. So as you can see, that token that we have, it has contained a lot of information. And if we look at it with the decoded value, we can see what are the information. So first, if you remember, we have specified that it is an HS256. So let's go back to our source code, and we can see that where is the user controller? No, it's gonna be the accounts controller. And we can see here inside our token descriptor, we have specified it's gonna be a 256 HS, which is, it's gonna be the HMAC SHA. So H and S stand for this. 256 type JWT, which we already know. And now here we can see the payload data, which is gonna be the ID, the sub, the email, and GTI. All of this are here. We have specified ID, sub, email, and GTI. And lastly, these are the default one that automatically added, specifically the expiration date. And here we can see that the signature, and if we add the password that we currently have, so if we go here to the app settings and we copy this and we paste this here, and we can say secrets is not encoded, and basically we can see we can actually see the secret key that's actually being utilized in order for us to verify that users. So that's why we can see that the JWT token has a lot of information, and it contains a lot of different attributes that's going to help us to authenticate the user in a completely stateless environment. One thing I just remembered that we forgot to do inside the accounts is we need to add this user to the users table. So how are we going to be doing that? It's very, very simple. So after we have made sure that the user has been created successfully, and basically what we can do is we can take the same logic that we currently have here inside the user. So what we can do is let's copy these. And this one is gonna be way better on, but right now just so we can complete this functionality. So let's fix this. And basically let's fix these references. And here, so this is gonna be based on the DTO. So that's gonna be registration DTO.last name. So let's take this copy. This is gonna be, and this is gonna be in an email. And currently for the date of birth, we don't send it, so we need to update it. But for now, we're just gonna put date time of now, just so we can avoid this error. Date time.utc now. That should be fine, and we're gonna leave these two empty. phone and country, we're gonna leave it empty. And once we have created this, let's delete this, we're adding it to that database. So here, adding user to the database. Okay, one thing else that we can do as well is we can link this user to the identity table. So do I think, did we add that field here? No, we didn't. So let's add a ticket here so we can add it. So inside our board here, we need to add a new ticket, and we're gonna call it add user identity field. Add identity field to the users table, and basically add a migration script to the identity field, identity ID. Add a migration script to add the identity ID to the users table. Let's add this now. It shouldn't take a lot of time, so let's go back to source code and let's go to the users table. And here what we can do is let us add prop grid, and we'll call it identity ID. And I think if we go cd, I think so, notebook dot, I think it's gonna be data service, and let's do .NET EF migrations add identity ID to users, and that's the startup project. We're gonna put user notebook.api. I think this should work. It will create a new migration script so we can create the users, the ID there. Great. Now let's just update it. .NET EF database update, and it's gonna be startup dash project. It's gonna be similar to notebook.api. No, it's gonna be API. Okay. Oh, startup project is wrong. Okay. Perfect. Now what we can do here is we can actually directly link that user, so we can put user.identity ID equal user dot what is it called? User, new user, new user dot ID. Perfect. And save. So why is this one good and this is a string? Oh, we can do this equal new GUID, and this GUID here is gonna be basically this one. And once we do this, I think we can actually run it and try it again. So let's go back to our application. See saha.api, and we can say .NET build. Just make sure that everything is building as it should be. And now .NET run. And once we do the .NET run, and let's go back to our to our Insomnia, and let's change the email here because it needs to be a unique ID. So we can say let's say something new. Let's say, for example, I don't know, Slim Shady, for example, Slim Shady, and we can put here slim at shady.com, and this is the password. And now before we do that, let's see all users. It's not there. So here we have Mohamad, Donald, Mickey, James, John, another Mickey, another Richard. Okay, so we don't have Slim. So now let's register. We got this, and now if we look here at the users, we should see Slim Shady added. So we have Donald, Mickey, James, John, Mickey, Richard, and we have Slim Shady added. Perfect. Now the next step is gonna be adding the login functionality. So now we will continue by building the login functionality. So what are we gonna do first? We're gonna create our DTO. So inside the models, inside the Saha Notebook Authentication, inside the models DTO, inside the incoming, we're gonna add a new class, and this class we're gonna call it user login request DTO. And this is gonna be very simple. It's gonna take two things. It's gonna put string email, and it's gonna take the password as well. And what we're gonna be doing as well is we're gonna make the required keyword similar to what we have done here. So let's copy this, and we'll add it here, and we'll add it here, and also let's fix the references. Okay, great. So once we have done that, let's go back to our account controller. And inside our account controller, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding the login action. So first thing, because it's a login, it's going to be an HTTP post. Perfect. Then we're going to put the route. And then basically we need to create the action. So public async task iAction result. And basically we're gonna call it login because we're gonna be logging in, and we're gonna put the from body because we're gonna be taking the object, the body of the object that's gonna be coming in, and we're gonna put the user login, what is it called, user login request DTO, and we're gonna be calling it login DTO. Perfect. Okay, great. So the first thing that we're going to be doing, similar to what we have done to the registration, is we need to check the model. So if model state.is valid, we're going to return one thing, but if it's not valid, we're going to return this, similar to what we did in the registration. So let's copy that one, we'll paste it here, and we're going to say it's an invalid payload because maybe the user has sent, for example, a username without an email, without a password, or a password without an email, something like that. So just to be on the safe side, we return this. The second condition that we're going to be adding right now is we need to validate if the user actually exists. So we're going to put var user exists, and it's going to be await, and we're going to put user manager that we have added before, and we're going to put the one find user find by email async, and we're going to pass the login dto.email. And basically what we're going to be doing here, we're going to check if the email exists. It means the user is going to be exist. So we're going to say if user exists equal null, we're going to send this is an invalid login. So we're going to send a bad request. So return bad request, or we can send an unauthorized. Let's add this later on. For now, let's send a bad request. So bad request, and we're going to put a new, I think it was user registration, or no. So let us add a response. So outgoing is user registration response. Let's add a new one, new class. We put user login response DTO, and basically we're gonna do the same thing as we did here. Is we're just gonna inherit from the auth result. The reason we're doing this is we're gonna add more feature in the future, but for now we're just creating the basics. So let's add this here. So it's gonna be user login response DTO. Perfect. And based on that, we're gonna have to fill the object, and we're gonna say there's success equal false. And for the errors, we're gonna be doing equal new list. And what we can say is, we can say, for example, invalid. We don't want to give a lot of information of what one wrote, so we can just invalid authentication request. That could be as simple as that. So because we don't want to tell the user doesn't exist, it will give more information that we need to. So in case the user actually exists, the next step for us is we need to check if the password for that user is correct or not. So let's add a comment here. So we'll put first step, check if email exists. And the second step will be check if the user has a valid password. Great. So once we have done that, now let's check it. So we're gonna create a variable is correct, and this basically it's gonna be await underscore user manager dot check password async. And let's see what it's gonna take. It's gonna request from us a user, which we already have, and then the password. So the user is gonna be user exist, and the password is gonna be the user DTO login DTO.password. So login DTO.password. And basically we need to check if it's correct or not. So if it's correct, it means that the user is authenticated. So we can put here, we need to generate a JWT token. And if it's not correct, we're just gonna send the same as before, which is an invalid request. So let's copy this in case here, because we say password doesn't match. So now let us generate the JWT token. So basically we're gonna be utilizing the same generate function that we did before. So let's copy this, and we're gonna create var. We're gonna call it JWT token equal generate, and we're gonna pass the user, which is gonna be called user exist, and that's it. So once we did that, all we need to do is just return an OK, and it's gonna be new. It's basically similar to what we have done here. User login response DTO, and basically we need to send back, first of all, success is true because it's successful, and then the second one is going to be the token that we have just generated, and we're just going to pass a JWT token. Nice. So let's do this. Let's fix the formatting and let's save this. So I think that should be fine. Let's see if there's anything else that we might have missed. Okay, so everything seems fine. Let us test it now. So first thing is we're gonna be doing is we're gonna be building it. So .NET build. This should take a few seconds. And now let's run it. .NET run. And now let's go back to Insomnia. And basically first let's do this. Perfect. And now let's use the same, let's add a new request. So a new request, we're gonna call it login, and it's gonna be a post, and it's gonna be a JSON body. And we're gonna click on create, and then basically we're gonna take the same as this, copy, we're gonna put it here, paste, and instead of register it's gonna be login. And we'll just take this same body, and we're just gonna remove what we don't need, which is gonna be the first name and last name. So right now, if our code function, this should authenticate and we should get the JWT token back. But let's do one thing first. Let's put a wrong password for now. And let's send it. We should get now an unauthorized, or basically right now a bad request. So we'll send this and we get invalid authentication request, which is basically what we want. Now let's remove the character that we added, which is 1, and let's send this again. And as we can see here, we have gotten the JWT request. Perfect. So now this means that the login process is working as it should be, which is what we want. So now since we have got this login process, this JWT token, now we need to implement actually the functionality of authorization. And what we're going to be doing right now is it's just for testing. This is not going to be in any way, shape, or form in the end product, but we're just going to add some authorization into the user's controller. So let's check here. And basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding conditions to the user controller in order for it to make it only available for the authorized user. So if I try to access this without supplying a JWT token in my header, it will not actually work. Only when I have a JWT token in my header will I be actually getting the result. So let's see what that means. So currently, if I go back to Insomnia and I go to, for example, get all users and I click on send, I can get all the users. And as you can see here from the header, I don't have anything else. So, but what I want to do, if I want to add here authentication, and I want to add here the bearer token, and basically the bearer token here, I'm going to pass the JWT token that I have, which is I got from the login. What I want to do is only when I pass this token here, I will be able to get this request. If I don't pass it, it will not work. So let's see how we can do that. So first I'm going to stop this application. And what I'm going to be doing here, I'm going to be adding some attribute to this class. And it's going to be something like this. So first I'm going to add the authorized attribute. So what does the authorized attribute mean? The authorized attribute means that I can only access this class if I have the right authorization, which means I have the right access. And in this case, I need to have the right JWT token. But this is not the only thing that I need to add. I need to add more information because I want to tell the authorized under which schema or which type of authentication I need to have in order for me to access. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to add the authentication schemes. And in the authentication schemes, I'm going to be adding JWT, bearer, defaults. Now let's see if we can add those references. And then here we're going to add the authentication scheme. So if I remove this right now like this, anyone can access it. If I add this, only if I have a valid JWT token, I will be able to access this request. And basically, just because I added this attribute here, ASP.NET Core Framework will be able to automatically recognize the JWT token. It will automatically be able to decrypt it, check if it's a valid token based on the condition that we have set. And if it meets the condition, it will give me access. If not, it will reject it. So let's save this. And what we're going to be doing here, we're going to just build it again, so .NET build, and this should take a few seconds to be completed. And now let's put .NET run, and it's running. Now let's go back to Insomnia, and first let us remove this. We don't want to send it. So right now I should get an unauthorized. That's not right. Maybe because I have this here. Let's see. Let me remove all of this. Actually, let's try the get user per ID. Okay, so, oh, sorry, I didn't save it. That's the issue. Okay, let's stop this again and let's run it. Okay, now let's go back to Insomnia and let's send this. See, I'm getting a 401 unauthorized because I didn't provide the JWT token. Similar to get all, if I send this right now, I got a 401 unauthorized. But if I come here and if I enable this, it's already enabled. Let's check this. And if I click on this, I wonder if it's authentication bearer. Let's check. And I think this one should be authorization, not authentication. Apologize for that. Authorization, yes. Yes, that's correct. Now let's send this, and I should get the response. And if I remove this, I will not get the response. Perfect. So now we know that the JWT token works. So let's copy this, and let's add it to the get user per ID. And let's add this here. Authorization. And let's add this one here. And let's send this. And we got the user that we wanted. Perfect. So basically what we have done here right now is we have added the login, and we generated the JWT token for the valid login, and we added the authorization only for the valid only for the user, only for the controller that we wanted. So we cannot access the controller without actually providing an authorization, which is going to be the JWT token in our header. Okay, great. Now let's go back to our web browser and let's do some updates. So here, what we're going to be doing is let's update this. So first of all, let's open this. And as we said here, it's under the authentication and authorization. So we did all of this. So let's move this from in progress to done. Great. And add the identity field user. We already done this. So let's add this as well. We'll put it under the authorization and authentication. And we're going to switch this to done because we have completed it as well. And I think, okay. Consent confirmation email, automapper, we can do it in the next video. All of this should be fine. Okay, great. So let's just do a quick summary of what we have done today. So let's go back to our source code and we can jump from there. So the first thing that we have done today is we have actually started by creating a new class library, which is going to contain all of our authentication information. So we have created those. As well, we have added the secret for our JWT token inside our app settings, which is going to be the secret that we're going to be utilizing in order for us to generate the JWT token. And once we have done that, we went to the startup class. We have injected those configuration of the JWT token inside our configure services. And after that, what we did is we actually implemented the authentication. So we added the middleware for authentication here, as well as we added the configuration for our JWT bearer token. So we added all of this configuration and we added the section that we want to revise. And after we done that, we went back to the configures and we have added the add authentication method here. So we are able to authenticate. Once we have done that, what we did is we have created a new controller, and this controller, we called it accounts, which is going to be responsible for handling all of the authentication and basically registration and login for now. We're going to be adding more functionality to it later on. And once we have done that, what basically the first thing that we did is we have injected the user manager, and the user manager here is a library. Let's add this comment here so we'll be able to understand what does it do. So we can say the user manager, it's a class provided by ASP.NET Core identity framework. Perfect. And we have utilized it. As well, we have injected the JWT token configuration in order for us to be able to create the JWT token. Once we have initialized them, we have created the register action where we have make it as a post. We have defined the DTO for it, and then we have created the condition where we're going to be checking for the registration. And once we have done all of that, we basically added the user back to the table, and we have updated the table so it will contain the identity ID for every user that we add. Once we have completed all of that, we have returned back to the user a success with the token inside that message. As well, we have implemented the login functionality. Similar, we have checked first for if the email exists or not, and then if it doesn't exist, we have returned a bad request. If it exists, we have checked for the password, and if the password match what we have, we actually generated a token and we return it back to the user. Okay, great. So now that we have implemented this functionality and we have completed all of this, so the next step is let us create some of the to-do list for our next video. So here, let us create a new ticket, and let's utilize this one. And basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to put add refresh tokens functionality. What does this mean? Which is going to be basically mean add the ability to have refresh tokens inside our response once the user login /register as well. What we need to do is once the user we need to add it, we need to update the following. So the first thing we need to update is, let's add these points. We need to update the login action, update the register action. We need to create a new method in the account controller, which is responsible for the refreshing of the token without the user logging in. And we're gonna actually add, and what else we need to add? Update the DTOs, and we're gonna be basically as well. Let's see, what can we add here? Let's maybe add the update. Actually, we need to create the DB structure because we need to add some tables, and then basically we need to update the unit of work to make sure this is to just update the unit of work to cater for this change. I think that sounds good. And maybe the last point that we can add here is no, there's no need for a last point. So that's gonna be one of the actions that we're gonna be doing next time. Let's see, let's save this. Let's open this in a new tab. And let's add it to the right epic, which is gonna be the authentication and authorization. And I think let's go back to our table here. And what I'm gonna be doing is as well, okay, we have here another automapper functionality that we need to add, which is gonna be fine. But let us also start thinking of some of the implementations or some of the functionality that we want to implement. So one of the functionality that we want to implement as well here, it could be actually starting adding information to the user. So basically I want to add a vaccine for every user, for example. So let's do this. So let's first create an epic, and we're gonna call it health record. Okay, and basically we're gonna be making this design the data structure for health records inside our application, and implement those changes. This is gonna be only the epic, so let's create this and let's refresh this, and let's create a task. Let's change it to a task, and we're gonna say design the structure for our health record. So we're gonna say create the database or the entity structure, entity structure for our health record. So it's gonna be basically first thing, update, create the entities, and then basically what we need to do is we need to migrate the changes, so update the database, and then we need to update unit of work. So that's the first part. And maybe let's see if we can create a controller. So let's see here. We're gonna say create controller for health record. And I think for this one, we're just gonna make it to do, because we need to think about the structure first before we can design the controller. So here, what we can do is let us add an epic for this. So this is gonna be health record. Similar to this one, we're gonna make it health record. Okay, great. I think we have a good plan for our next video and the next task that we're gonna accomplish. Perfect. Again, thank you very much for watching. I hope this video was helpful. Please write your question in the comments down below. As well, please like, share, and subscribe if you like this video. It will really help the channel. Have a great day.